Welcome to a very special, extremely dark explainer. Today we're diving straight into the horrifying lengths nature goes to for survival. We're exploring a hidden, violent world where bodies and minds are just ruthlessly hijacked. So brace yourself.
People like to say nature isn't cruel, it's just terrifyingly efficient. Well, let's test that theory. We're going to walk through an anthology of biological horror today, turning the dial from bizarre body modifications all the way up to utterly inescapable mind-altering doom. Okay, our first nightmare begins with something affectionately called the disco snail. But the real star of the show here is a master manipulator, a parasite known as Leucochloridium paradoxum. Picture this. The parasite invades a snail's eye stalks, literally forcing them to engorge and pulse with these vivid neon colors. To a hungry bird flying overhead, it looks exactly like a hypnotic, juicy caterpillar. But to the snail, it is an absolute death sentence. The hijacking is incredibly thorough. First, the physical invasion actually alters the snail's brain, completely deleting its natural instinct to seek out shade. Then, it forces the host high up into the sunlit canopy, just to sit there and wait. It literally becomes a blinding neon sign, just begging to be eaten alive by a bird. Now, if that wasn't visceral enough for you, let's escalate things. We're moving on to a viral infection that turns caterpillars into climbing liquid time bombs. This absolute horror show is known as treetop disease. What happens is a baculovirus hacks into the caterpillar's neurological response to light. It essentially forces the insect on a fatal march to the absolute highest peaks of whatever plant it's on. And once it reaches the summit, the horror really accelerates. The virus actively blocks the caterpillar's ability to molt. So, trapped inside its own skin, the host literally melts from the inside out, liquefying into this thick, horrific viral soup. Think about the brutal sequence here. It climbs, it attaches firmly, and then it liquefies. Finally, it just rains these infectious viral particles down onto the leaves below. It's a biological shower that guarantees the next generation of feeding caterpillars is going to meet the exact same gruesome fate. All right, from liquefaction, let's pivot to reproductive hijacking. Meet Saculina carcini. This is a parasitic barnacle that acts as a literal, real-life body snatcher for crabs. The process is wild. First, this microscopic larva turns itself into a living syringe, stabbing the crab and injecting a tiny blob right into its bloodstream. That little blob then grows roots, spreading entirely through the host's insides like some invasive plant, before eventually pushing out a reproductive sac exactly where the crab's own eggs are supposed to be. The result is total, complete bodily hijacking. The parasite violently alters the crab's hormonal balance. If it's a male crab, the parasite completely castrates it, feminizing the host entirely, both physically and psychologically. And the behavioral shift is insane. The crab's natural appetite for things like mussels, it simply vanishes. Instead, it gets reduced to a doting, zombified babysitter, grooming a monster's eggs. It meticulously aerates and protects that protruding parasite sac exactly as if it were its own offspring. Now let's look at some incredibly precise environmental puppeteering. This one is orchestrated by the lancet liver fluke, or Dicrocolium dendriticum. What happens here is an act of truly chilling sacrifice. A single parasite from the invading group migrates directly into the ant's subesophageal ganglion, which is basically its brain. And it goes there specifically to set the ultimate trap. Once inside, the parasite triggers a reversible tetany. It physically forces the ant to climb up a blade of grass and lock its jaws in a fatal death grip, where it just waits blindly to be eaten by a grazing sheep. But here is the truly crazy part. At dawn and dusk, the ant is locked onto the grass, waiting for death. But during the brutal midday heat, the ant actually unlocks its jaws to hide in the shade. Now, it's not saving itself. It's just protecting the parasite from roasting in the sun, only to resume its suicide grip the second dusk falls again. Pushing even deeper into psychological horror, we find Toxoplasma gondii. This is a protozoan that doesn't just change simple habits, it fundamentally rewires mammalian emotions. It literally rewires paralyzing fear into irresistible attraction.
Toxoplasma broadly targets a rat's brain, flooding it with dopamine, and by doing this, it entirely erases the rat's innate, hardwired evolutionary terror of cats. Think about it. An uninfected rat relies on avoiding feline odors to survive. But an infected rat, it actually becomes sexually attracted to cat urine. By surgically altering the perception of predation risk while leaving the rest of the rat's health intact, the parasite is basically serving the rat on a silver platter to the cat, which is the parasite's ultimate host. Finally, we reach the absolute apex of inescapable doom with nematomorpha, better known as the horsehair worm. I want you to imagine a massive worm, coiled and crammed impossibly tight inside a tiny cricket. By manipulating the cricket's neurochemistry, the worm induces this frantic, light-seeking behavior. It actively drives the host toward reflective bodies of water, like ponds, where the cricket will eagerly plunge in and drown itself. As the cricket suffocates in the water, the adult worm wriggles free. It is a writhing, intensely violent exit from the dying host. Also, the worm can go off and mate. But the true horror, the ultimate backup plan, is what happens if a fish happens to swallow that cricket first. This worm displays the ultimate anti-predator contingency. If the cricket gets swallowed by a predator fish, the trapped worm initiates an intense muscular response. It uses extreme force to actively crawl backward, forcing its way out of the mouth, the gills, or even the nose of the very predator that just ate its host. There is literally no escape. As this dark explainer has shown, when we really peel back the layers of the natural world, we are left with one chilling, absolute truth. Evolution doesn't care if you survive, it only cares if its plan does. So the next time you feel a very unusual, inexplicable urge, you might want to ask yourself, who is really in the driver's seat?